Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Gene Curl, and as many of you know, or anybody who's been on my channel a while knows, I was at one point a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormonism. And today I wanted to talk about 10 things the missionaries won't tell you. So if you are investigating the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or if you are new to the church, I want to talk about 10 things that the missionaries absolutely won't tell you. But these are true things about the church that you can find out for yourself that they are true. The first thing is they won't tell you that Joseph Smith had a lot of wives, up to 40 wives. Some of his wives were underage, some of them as young as 14 years old. And some of Joseph Smith's wives had living husbands at the time he married them. They didn't get divorced and then married Joseph Smith. They had living husbands, and Joseph Smith married them as well. Joseph Smith married mothers and daughters. Joseph Smith also married sisters, which both are prohibited in the Bible. And so all of Joseph Smith's wives and the conditions of that is something that the missionaries will not tell you, but it's something that you can easily find out. In fact, the church has a church essay series where you can go on and read about certain topics, and the polygamy and the Nauvoo period is one of the things that their essays talk about. Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon by a stone and a hat. The church would have you believe that Joseph Smith had the golden plates laying on the table and that he had looked at the golden plates and he translated them. But that is not how it happened. The church even admits now that Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon by taking a seer stone, putting the seer stone in a hat, and then burying his face in the hat, and that he would tell his scribe what he saw written on the stone. Whatever would appear on the stone, he would tell the scribe, and the scribe would write it down. And that is not how the church depicts the Book of Mormon translation, but that is how it actually happened. That's how the actual record of the church history shows that the Book of Mormon is translated. The third thing that the church will not tell you is about the Book of Abraham. The Book of Abraham is one of the church's standard works, one of the church's scriptures that is in the Pearl of Great Price. And what they will tell you about the Book of Abraham is that there was a traveling salesman that had some mummies and some papyri, and Joseph Smith discovered that these papyri contained the writings of Abraham, and that he bought them and translated them into the Book of Abraham. Well, what happened is after Joseph Smith died, his wife Emma Smith sold these to a museum. Years later, they were found and they were sold to the church. The church was excited to have them because they could once and for all prove that Joseph Smith was a prophet, so they had them translated. Well, both the Egyptologists inside and outside the church all came to the conclusion that these papyri were absolutely the papyri that Joseph Smith actually had. So you couldn't say they were different. These were the papyri Joseph Smith had, and Egyptologists inside and outside the church all agreed that these papyri had absolutely nothing to do with Abraham, that they were common funerary scripts that were written to a man named Hor. The fourth thing that missionaries won't tell you is about the Kinderhook plates. There was a man who wanted to prove that Joseph Smith was not a prophet. So he created some brass plates, and he said that he dug them up from the ground, and he brought them to Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith translated them and said that they were an actual record of this man who was a descendant of Ham. And then later, the guys who made the Kinderhook plates came out and said, hey, those weren't actually real plates. Those were those were something we made as a hoax to prove that Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet. Well, recently these Kinderhook plates have been found, and science has proved that they were not ancient, that they were made in the 1800s. So Joseph Smith absolutely did not translate them. They were a fraud. The fifth thing that missionaries won't tell you is that after you've been in the church a while, when you go to the temple, you have to promise that you will give everything that you possess and everything you may possess, including your own life if necessary, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So you have to promise that if the church asks, you'll give them everything you have and everything you may have, including your life. And that is no small ask. But they will absolutely not tell you that when you're investigating the church. You don't find out about that until you go to the temple. The sixth thing the missionaries will not tell you is about the Joseph Smith first vision account, that there are actually multiple versions. The one that they will tell you about is Joseph Smith seeing God the Father and Jesus Christ, and them telling him that all churches are corrupt and telling him that he was going to start the correct church. What they won't tell you is that there are multiple accounts, and the earlier accounts say nothing about God the Father and Jesus Christ. They just have Jesus Christ, or just an angel, and tell him his sins are forgiven. Some of the accounts don't say anything about the churches being corrupt. Some of them do. Some of them have angels instead of God the Father and Jesus Christ. And so there are so many differences. And I don't know about you, but if I saw God, I would remember every detail of it, and I wouldn't have any problem writing it down and having my story be the same every time I tell it. But what it seems like is that Joseph Smith started out with a simple account, and it became more complex as he told it. And the early church didn't know anything about Joseph Smith's first vision. Not even his family talks about it. It wasn't until much later, after the church started, that he'd start talking about the first vision. The seventh thing that the missionaries won't tell you about is that their belief that God used to be a man. There's a saying in the church, as man is, God once was, as God is, men may become. So the church believes that God used to be a man, and he became so righteous that he became God, and that through our obedience and through following the rules, that we also can become a God. And that is something that they will not tell you. You don't really find out about that until you go to the temple. The eighth thing that missionaries won't tell you is how and why Joseph Smith died. They will tell you that Joseph Smith was martyred, but what they won't tell you is that Joseph Smith was mayor of Nauvoo, and he was practicing polygamy, but he denied publicly having practiced polygamy. And there was a disaffected member of the church who was actually a member of the first presidency, William Law. And William Law, after Joseph Smith propositioned his wife, left the church and started this newspaper called the Nauvoo Expositor. And he had only one issue of the newspaper. This newspaper talked about Joseph Smith's polygamy, and Joseph Smith decided that the paper was a public nuisance because he didn't want anything said about him or bringing to light his polygamy. So, as mayor of Nauvoo, he ordered that the paper was destroyed, and so they burned the printing press and destroyed most of the copies of the Nauvoo Expositor. I mean, there are still some copies that survive, so you can read it today. But Joseph Smith just ordered the destruction of the printing press, and the governor of Illinois ordered Joseph Smith to turn himself in and stand trial. And Joseph Smith was on trial, was in prison awaiting trial when a mob broke in and killed him. Joseph Smith did not go as a lamb to the slaughter like they said. Joseph Smith actually had a pistol that he smuggled into the prison, and he killed two people. Two of the mob members, Joseph Smith killed them by shooting through the door. When Joseph Smith died, he didn't die as a martyr like they say. I mean, he was martyred, but when he was last-ditch effort to try to save himself, he gave the Masonic distress call as he was falling out the window. So, Joseph Smith did not die as a lamb going to the slaughter. He fought. He had a smuggled pistol. Him and the other people drank wine before they died. And Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram Smith, they were not wearing their temple garments when they died. The ninth thing that missionaries will not tell you is the evidences against the Book of Mormon. They will tell you that the Book of Mormon is the most correct book on the earth, and that it is the keystone of the religion. What they won't tell you is that there are a lot of anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon talks about horses and steel and silk and a lot of things that were not in the Americas at the time the Book of Mormon was supposedly written. And they won't tell you about the fact that a lot of the Book of Mormon is just a copy of the Bible, and some of the mistakes that were in the version of the Bible that Joseph Smith had made it into the Book of Mormon. They will not, the Book of Mormon says in the introductory page that the Native Americans are descendants of a group of Jewish people who came to the Americas. But the missionaries will not tell you that the DNA has disproved that, and that the Native Americans actually have no Semitic blood at all. The 10th thing that the missionaries will not tell you is that in the early church, black members of the church were denied the priesthood. And it wasn't until after the Civil Rights Movement and after a lot of protests that the church finally decided to give blacks the priesthood. And then, now there are a couple of other bonus things that I want to tell you that the missionaries will not tell you. The first one is about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. In early Utah, there was a group of people coming through on their way to California, and a group of people from the church decided that they did not like them, and they they dressed up like Native Americans, and they killed them all. And then kept the children who were too small to remember. They kept the children and killed all the adults, men, women, and older children. And they just made it look like it was an Indian attack, and they buried their bodies. Tried to hide it. And so if you look up the Mountain Meadows Massacre, you'll see that Brigham Young claimed to not know anything about it. So I'm not saying that Brigham Young ordered it, but the church did cover it up. Then the final thing that I'm going to talk about that missionaries will not tell you is that the church believes that Jesus Christ and the devil are brothers. They believe that every spirit born is they believe that everybody, including Jesus and the devil, are literal children of a father and mother in heaven, and that the devil is Jesus' younger brother, and that he rebelled and became the devil. They don't teach that Jesus was an angel, or that the Satan was an angel. They teach that Jesus that the devil was Jesus' literal brother, and that they also teach that you and I are literally brothers and sisters of Jesus. So the devil being a brother of Jesus is something that the church will not tell you. But if you ask them, they may or may not admit it. With all these things, you can see that the church has some problems. These are not the only problems that the church has, but these are some of the bigger problems. And so if you're investigating the church, or if you're new to the church, hopefully you will consider these things before you make a lifelong commitment to the church. If you have any questions or concerns, or there's anything that you would like me to explain more fully, comment down below and let me know, and I will do my best to answer your questions. With that said, I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.